Music to the noise, yeah, the mess we make. Machine Pun Kelly, get caught in the fake. Facts and logic with a twist of chest. Strip it down to truth, yeah, forget the rest. Humor blows the lies right out of the park. Look beyond the shadows, protect the dark. Sparks of laughter fire up the night, bringing clarity when they blur the fight. Cut through the chaos, yeah, the tangled lies. Steampunk Kelly with a set of clear eyes. Truths and jokes gonna rock this show. Step into light where the real facts glow.
Welcome back to the Pun Show, where occasionally I pun and I always show, or something like that. I don't know. So how's everybody doing today? Anything insane happen? I've been busy in the kitchen for the last hour, so I don't know if anything happened insane while I was in the kitchen. You never know with this administration. Oh, hang on one second. Hey, Google, turn on the lights. My high-quality studio here, run by Google. My lighting is done by Google. So anyway, there was something I wanted to talk about before I started talking about the stuff I want to talk about. Now I can't remember what it is. Oh, yeah. The one dude that said that, what was it? Hang on. Got to pull this one up. This was like, sometimes the Trump administration says stuff we could not, like, honestly. The what was it? Let me find this guy. Hassett. Let's just play this. Why don't we just play this? Because this is so monumentally stupid that it is impossible to believe almost that somebody could say something this monumentally stupid. All right, so let me share my screen. I mean, I just cannot imagine that anybody would think this was a good idea.
But the fact is that the U.S. economy is fundamentally sound, and that if it were to be extended, it wouldn't really disrupt the U.S. economy very much at all. It would hurt consumers, and we'd have to think about, if that continued, what we would have to do about that. But that's like really the last of our concerns right now, because we're very confident that this thing is going ahead of schedule. Okay. But the fact is that the U.S. economy is fundamentally sound, and that,
like, let's think about that. He says that what's bad for the consumers is not bad for the economy. Yeah, it might be bad for the consumers, but we're not worried about that. He literally said the consumers are the last of his concerns right now. I'm just saying every single Democrat needs to play that for every single ad, and the Democrats will win both houses in a landslide. Because this is what the Trump administration has become. They have become the administration of the Epstein class. And a lot of people are focused on the whole, we're not concerned about the consumers part, like the consumers. But who's the where? Who's not consumed? Who's not concerned about the consumers? Like, think about that. The Epstein class is not worried about the consumers. That's who's not worried. The Trump administration, when I say the Trump administration and the Epstein class, I'm being redundant. I'm saying the same thing twice. But they don't care. They literally do not care. And something about this, I'll have a video that I play later. I want to point out something that's not getting a lot of discussion. Dirty Money says, "Damn you Republicans for winning all 7 swing states." Yeah. And this is the irony of it all, is they won all 7 swing states for a reason. They won. Here, let me see if I got a. There, that's the one. They won all 7 swing states because of a very simple fact. They won all 7 swing states because of inflation. That was the number one reason that people voted for the Trump administration. He was going to do something on day one to bring prices down. And you had enough people that were dumb enough to actually believe that even though he never said a thing about what he was going to do about inflation, and even though he said he was going to like impose tariffs on the rest of the world, which is like saying you're going to save balloons with a nail gun. He's just an idiot. And everybody was just like, okay, but they were that frustrated with pricing, with prices going up. So Dirty Money says 2. What is 2? What is the 2 for? But yeah, they were upset with prices going up, and so they voted Trump in. That's what happened. So anyway, now you've got this happening. Dennis Hassert sitting there going, we don't care about the consumers. They're the last of our concerns. And on top of that, there's something that's on the horizon that people aren't talking about. And that is that you have all this fertilizer coming in. And I've got a video on this. 2.4% inflation. Yeah, but if you read the projections, Dirty, can I call you Dirty? Sorry, that sounds kind of... Anyway, if you look at the projections, it could go up to 4% by the time, and you'll understand why when I mention this. It'll be up to 4% by November. Because what's happening is with the Straits of Hormuz, you've got the ships not being able to get through. And a good percentage of the fertilizer we need comes from that area. I think it's as high as 40%. And then the parts we don't need, like the other places to get all the prices of that are going to go up. And this is the worst possible timing for it. Because what's happening with this is all the prices of fertilizer is going up right during the spring, right when we plant our crops. So the farmers, small farmers, they don't have like tons and tons of extra money. And fertilizer is not the kind of thing you want to sit around storing massive amounts of because, explosions and whatnot. So it's kind of like you get it when you need it. That's what you do with fertilizer. Not like we're talking about warehouses and everything. You don't order this a year out. So it's going to affect planting season. The other thing that's going to affect planting season is the mass deportations. They're not going to have the fertilizer and they're not going to have the people to do the planting. And so those two things combined are going to cause a food shortage come spring or come fall. And so some of the there's some projections that food prices, and these are like not liberal agencies or something, like people like Wharton. There's an expected inflation of food up to 4% by November. And when you look at, and that was before the whole Iran war thing. So when you combine those two things together, you could have inflation rising up above 4%. And in addition to like the gas prices, what are the gas prices right now? I think we are pushing close to $4.80. $3.79. It's currently $3.79. Just a week ago it was $3.53. A month ago it was $2.91. So it's gone up 90 cents since we started this little excursion, to borrow a word from Donald Trump. So there's that on top of the fertilizer prices and the labor shortage. And so that means all the other things that are also connected to oil will also be going up. So I'm telling you, prices are going to go up. They're going to go up a lot. And as prices are going up, and Donald Trump is sitting there mocking affordability by going, affordability. Everybody uses the word affordability. Okay, so let's go through some of the comments here. All right. Most just say money, but you do. Most just say money. I don't know what that even means. Pray mutiny. I don't know what that means either. Planting isn't done by hand though. Planting, it depends on what kind of crop you're talking about, Dirty. You don't think that, like, not every single most farms aren't automated. And here's the thing about automated farms, Dirty. Automated farms are the ones that are the corporate farms. The small private farms aren't automated. The crops grown on the small private farms aren't automated. It sounds like you're listening to right-wing news and you're getting your information from there. But trust me, I have gone beyond the headlines on this. Go look at what people like Wharton say. Don't look at what Fox News tells you. So this, I don't know what all that means. I don't read emojis well. Kelly, inflation hit around 17%. No, it never hit around 17% under Joe. I think it peaked around 9%. And this is what I just said, right? That was the number one reason that Joe Biden won. And it's not, it hit 9%. It didn't have anything to do with Joe Biden. It had to do with, guess what? Oil prices going up. Oil prices that got jacked up because of the Ukraine war. That's the number one reason that we were having inflation, along with the COVID crisis and the supply chains. Well, now with the tariffs and with the current war in Iran, that's, some people are saying that supply chain interruption can be worse than under COVID. So what Donald Trump has done is duplicate the things that caused that inflation under Biden. You can't just butt Biden away everything, Dirty. MAGA is a terrorist organization. In a lot of ways, I find that hard to disagree with. Trump's followers fell for the okie dokie. You are lost, man. I know exactly where I am. We have cedars around here. Yes, some plants you can harvest with cedars, dude. Not every plant you can. Do you understand that not everything is universally true? Yes. What do you farm, though? What do you farm? Not everything you farm can be done with cedars. I'm sure there are things around you that can be farmed with cedars. There are things that can't be farmed with cedars. Joe did not sell off nearly all our. Trump just opened up the reserves himself. Why? And he didn't sell off our reserves. He opened up our reserves the same way Trump just did. MAGA voters forget COVID. You're not mad at Biden. You're mad at capitalism. I see what you're saying. Not to mention the $8.3 trillion Trump added to the deficit. I know you didn't say harvest. I know you're saying cedars. Not every plant can be seeded by automation. Some plants you have to sow by hand. Yeah. Those are definitely plants you can sow with seeders. Not every plant can do that. Strawberries, you can't do that. Hey Gary, how you doing today? You won't get you if you were banned, you wouldn't be here, dude. The reserves was brought down to. We didn't have the reserves in World War II. I would never ban Gary. Exactly. I live in ag country. Cedars don't do all crops. Wait, did people already forget that gas companies sat on drilling permits? Yes. Yeah, strawberries you can't do with cedars. Strawberries are a very hand plant. Not everything is corn. So anyway, you're going to have, because of the fertilizer, which, by the way, you never mentioned anything about that, dude. Like, it's not like you can just sow crops a month later. This is the time to harvest, to sow crops, and people are having trouble getting the fertilizer. So you can't, if you don't have the fertilizer, it doesn't even matter if you can do it with a seeder or not. So I mean, that's the other part of the equation. And so if you're not able to sow crops, you can't harvest crops because there's nothing sowed to harvest. And if you don't harvest them, that means there's no supply of crops, which means the price of crops is going to go up. And if the price of crops goes up, that means it's inflation. And you've got these things that are going to be compounding. You've got inflation compounding on inflation. I am not talking about politics here. I'm talking about basic, fundamental supply and demand economics. Right now, there's no supply of fertilizer. That means in fall, there won't be a supply of crops. And when that happens, as we have already established with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris not winning in 2024, we have established that voters are ready to punish people for inflation. But they're not going to be able to blame this inflation on Joe Biden. This inflation is all more directly than anything you could say about Joe Biden. Every single aspect of what's going on with the inflation that we currently have and the stagnant job market is all direct result of Donald Trump's policy. At least with Joe Biden, you had jobs being created. I think we are now at net negative job growth since over the last year. Donald Trump is now in his second term. He's now in his second term. That's, by the way, if you've never made your own kombucha, try it. Donald Trump is in his second term, and he's still at a net negative for jobs created. No, we didn't have oil reserves in 1945. I'm sorry, I misspoke. I mean pudding all the time. Pretty. Yeah, that's what I thought. The oil reserves weren't created until 1975. They were a direct response to the oil crisis in the 70s. It was Gerald Ford created the oil reserves. Okay, putting on timeout. Okay, well, Jason hates me because I have a different opinion. I didn't say. Just like strawberries can't be machine harvested, right? A lot of crops can't. 1.7 million jobs lost under Trump, and he's still going. Yeah, but we don't get all our fertilizers from there. You can't just like shrug your shoulders. Like, is this where are you getting your talking points, Dirty? Do you ever even challenge what the right wing tells you? Not all of our. Why do you think we buy fertilizer from the Middle East? Why do you think that is? Why? Just because we're kind? Because we want to do a favor for them? If we could get all our fertilizer from what we produce and can get from Canada, then we wouldn't be worried about it. But the farmers are actually worried about it. And by the way, don't forget about Donald Trump's little tariff on Canada either. The good news is we still have air to breathe and the Lord to pray to. Well, not if Donald Trump has anything to do with it. So it means if you're spending more on it, Dirty, if they have to spend more money on fertilizer, that means prices are going up. And it's not like there's an infinite supply about it. Both Democrats and Republicans are compromised. Both parties need to be reset. I like you already. Well, thank you. I like me too. So does my wife sometimes. All right. So now let's talk about something important. This is something I've been wanting to talk about for a while. And so I made this slide deck for today. And I really hope this goes well, because I think it even ties into some of the conversations we've had this morning already, or this afternoon, I should say. Let's talk about why we're arguing about everything and solving nothing. Why are we so unable to have any honest discourse about anything in this country? It's like insane. You cannot bring up anything. Like I can just say, boy, LeBron James sure is a good basketball player, and somebody will pipe in, why do you hate Donald Trump? You know, like you can't talk about anything without somebody coming in and making it into some sort of political thing. And so if you're talking about any actual issue, political or legal, then people start stupid arguments about it. And it's always got to become this binary thing. So I made this slide deck. I'm going to go through it. I'm going to take breaks when we need them. But I hope whether, you know, we're talking to Dirty or Gary or the, you know, people that like me, I hope we can talk about this and actually have discourse, actually have a conversation about the things and not about the sides that we're on. Okay. We have this habit that we look at everything as left or right. That's leftist. That's leftist. You know, or that's right wing, you know. It's always leftist, right wing. And we have this very bizarre view of political spectrum in this country. We have our view of the political spectrum is very, very narrow. And somebody said something about both parties are compromised. And I think that sometimes, like, there are definitely people in both parties that are compromised. And I see people say both parties are the same, which I don't think that's true. I think there are real differences. But I think those are differences that are not as extreme as we think. And one of the things that I wanted to do, I don't know if anybody's going to respond to any of this, but like, if you really want to think about like healthcare, we have, you know, like some people are like Medicaid for all, and then some people are like get rid of the ACA. But we never talk about things as a range, as a scope of possibilities. It's always, you know, do you agree with this thing or do you disagree with that thing? And it's never like, what can we do to solve healthcare problems? It's, you know, just let's argue about the Affordable Care Act or argue about the Medicaid cuts. It's always left versus right, my side versus your side. And what feels moderate in one country can be extreme in another. So like I was thinking of this, I think in terms of defense spending, Donald Trump or Joe Biden would be considered a moderate in defense spending. He didn't cut the defense spending. I think he may actually even maybe raised it a little bit. But you know, Donald Trump's all like, oh, military, military, military. We have the greatest military in the world. He's getting his own fleet of sheets built and named after him that he gets to design or whatever. Like he's just way over the top. He's far right. But if we were to take Joe Biden and we were to plant him in like Denmark or England or Spain, we would be talking about like a 1,000% increase in defense spending. Joe Biden would be considered an extreme right candidate as far as defense spending goes in England, even in England, because we spend so much more money, so much more of a percentage of our GDP and our federal revenue is spent on defense than any other country in the world. It's not even close. So, like, we might think of, you know, something as moderate where everybody else would think of it as an extreme. And I don't know if you've ever like looked at maps that are have different perspectives, but if you ever look at a map where like Australia is the center, and then because the Earth is actually a sphere, when you flatten it out, the US looks a lot smaller than it does if the US is the center. Whatever is the center of that map will look larger relative in relative proportion to the other countries around it. And this is kind of what we grew up seeing. We see the map in a certain way, and we think of the US as a certain size relative to other things. Like most people are shocked when they find out that that Africa is like 3 times the size of North America. We don't think of it that way because our perspective is off. And that's what I'm trying to say is true about our political spectrum. Our focus is always just on us. So we have this dialed up perception of what the spectrum is that's off kilter from the rest of the world. They have programmed the right to argue about everything. How about, well, we've got to talk about politics today, but I think we're going to talk about issues today. We disagree on a lot, but I still like touch my heart. And hopefully I will validate that today, because I want to go through and I'm going to talk about some things that I think I'm hoping will really challenge us, not just my side or your side or whatever, but all of us to really think about things beyond MAGA or not MAGA or Democrat or not Democrat. If I say pepperoni is the best pizza topping, I'm going to get 53 deaths and 37 doxing. Yes, and don't even bring up pineapple. If you bring up pineapple, the wealthy want us divided. I agree. And I've mentioned this before on the show. If you ever get a chance to read a book called White Trash, it is a book that goes through the entire history of the country up to like Obama. I think it was published before the first Trump administration. It goes through our entire nation's history and how the wealthy have pitted poor white people against people of color to get them to fight each other so that they're not realizing the real enemy is the rich. Hey, Mac Truck, how you doing today? Good to see you. Didn't see you yesterday. Republicans will never be legally elected for decades. Legally elected. Like the way you squeeze that word in there. We are divided from the wealthy. That's what I'm saying. When Dennis Hastert says we're not worried about the consumers right now, if there is ever anything you needed to hear anyone say that says that the Trump administration is not one of us, it is that. They themselves said we're not worried about the consumers. They're the ones that classified themselves as a different group of people than the consumers. And then he said, that's the last thing we're concerned about. The last thing the Trump administration is concerned about is you. I think that's selling him short. I think he's a sociopath. I think he's a psychopath. I think he's a narcissist. I think he's got a whole collection of, maybe he's got Trump derangement syndrome. Maybe that's actually Trump derangement system should be his particular collection of derangements that is like almost unique, that somebody could be that psychotic and mentally ill and still be the most powerful man in the world. We are divided by healthy, wealthy. Denmark is probably the NATO member with the worst relations with the USA, next to Spain's relationships with the USA. And both of those were just fine and dandy until Trump decided to start doing stuff. There's like this whole thing about the NATO. Trump's trying to get NATO to involve themselves in the Iran war, and he doesn't seem to understand that NATO and Article 5 is not what he thinks it is. Article 5 says if any nation is attacked, that we will all support the nation that is attacked. It doesn't say that if a nation attacks another country, we're all going to attack that other country. It's not a pact to, like, we're going to gang up on any country that the United States decides to go to war with. And so Donald Trump, I mean, I when we talk about Trump's psychotic nature and his TDS, like, think about this. He literally is arguing that if he decides to go to war with the country, that he doesn't have to consult Congress, he doesn't have to consult the UN, he doesn't have to consult NATO, but every army in NATO is obligated to do what he says. He thinks he's king of the world. Oh, wait. So I'm sorry. I wonder if we can all, I think we can be impartial by talking about, I want us to try and be impartial, Gary, and I want you to be impartial, and I'll try to be impartial. I wouldn't be surprised if Trump did something stupid in 2027 and got us kicked out of NATO. I'd almost be more surprised if he didn't. UK spent 2.5% on defense. The USA spent 3.5% of GDP. Is that all? I thought it was more than that. I mean, we definitely have a bigger GDP. And the difference between 3.5% and 2.5% is 40% more, something like that. Doesn't American have any domestic issues? They want to go on wars in occupying countries. Well, I think the country does. I just don't think Donald. I think that Donald Trump's trying to distract from the domestic issues. Just listening. Orwell was right when making up Animal Farm. Not quite a dictatorship, but a very horrible leader. Trump is all of the above. Are we concerned about TSA and Coast Guard? Are we? All you have to do, if you're concerned about them, call your congressman and tell them to just, like, issue warrants. Like, follow the Constitution. If the Republicans would just agree to follow the Constitution, the TSA and the Coast Guard would have their funding. I'm pretty sure in mid-February, or fund them separately. The Democrats have said, let's fund them separately. Republicans don't want that, because the Republicans want to continue to violate your civil rights. The Fourth Amendment is not on the bargaining table. I'm pretty sure in mid-February, I saw a video where ICE was looking for people criticizing ICE, and they're looking for the names. What in the North Korea? And now you have Donald Trump saying that the journalists who criticize his war in Iran should be, like, prosecuted for treason. I've tried to be subtle. Gary says, I'm beginning to think that Kelly doesn't like Trump. LOL. No, I kind of dislike Trump. I'm not going to pretend I don't. But I'll tell you this about Trump. I watched, like, I didn't know all that much about Trump. I thought he was like some kind of real estate mogul or something, and vaguely remember something about casinos. And I remember like he lost the USF, well, he won the USFL lawsuit, but then kind of got $1 or something. But I didn't really care about Trump. And then The Apprentice came out and everybody was watching it. And there was this, kind of buzz about The Apprentice. So I watched one episode just to see what it was like. And I can't remember what they were selling, like what the challenge was. But I remembered like Donald Trump. This was what happened is like they announced the challenge and Donald Trump gave them advice for, like, this is what you need to do to win. Then they all went out and everybody ignored his advice. Then they came back and he kind of talked about how the guy that won because he took his advice, even though the guy like basically did the opposite of what Trump said you should do. And then Trump took credit for that guy winning. And basically, that's everything you need to know about Trump. That's all his presidency has been, is just pretending he's doing great when whatever the actual reality is. Iran sold its oil to China, which it's allowed to do. I'll be home in 5 minutes. How long the stream got left? I just got going about 36 minutes ago, Brett. ICE is bringing the pain in Vermont as I type. And this is a good thing. Remember the people to look for Jesus for your answers, not Trump. Jan. America is not NATO. MAGA losers rejoice. Kelly, do you have any suggestions as to how we should process and deal with these things on a daily basis? I don't know what you mean by these things, like just the deluge of chaos that comes out of the Trump administration. I'm just telling you how I deal with it is like first I try to be objective. Like I try to actually learn what the facts are. And I'm not acrimonious when I say the facts are almost never what Trump says they are. Sometimes facts aren't what the Democrats say they are. And I'll call that out too. Like I've seen a lot of this narrative that you need to have a passport to vote under the SAVE Act. And that's not true. And there's a lot of the stuff that about the name change that's being overstated by the Democrats. Because, it says each state can determine for itself what you need if, your name is changed. So most states have, can and probably will say, bring your marriage certificate along with your birth certificate and you're fine. You don't have to have your name changed on your birth certificate or something. You just have to prove who you are. The problem is that you do need either a birth certificate or a passport. There's like some people say, well, you can, in certain states you can get, well, some people say your ID, your driver's license is enough. It's not. And it's not even if you have like the verified ID, that's not enough. Pull out your driver's license, and if it says you're a citizen, then that'll work. The problem with that is, one, you have to actually ask for it when you go get your driver's license. It's a particular type of driver's license. It's not the standard one. In order to get that, you have to ask for it and you have to pay extra for it. And that's for people that live in states, like the states where that's allowed are like right next to Canada or Mexico. And then so that you can use it as like a mini passport. Okay. But only 5 states even have it. And even then, only a tiny percentage of people in those states have it. And in order to get that, you have to have your passport or your birth certificate. All right. So that's one thing. The other thing is not everybody has a passport or a birth certificate. And I don't mean they don't have access to their birth certificate. There are people that don't have a birth certificate. Like they can't go online and order a birth certificate. Or they can't go to, whatever agency and order a birth certificate. There is no original birth certificate from which to obtain a copy. There are some people that up until the 50s, not everybody that was born in America even got issued a birth certificate. Some people that were born in homes never got issued a birth certificate. So if you're in your 70s or older, there's a chance you don't have a birth certificate. The other thing is some people, their birth certificate was, in the hospital they were born in or whatever. And that hospital or whatever was destroyed and their birth certificate along with it. And so they no longer have an original birth certificate. I think nowadays, like a lot of them have been digitized and it's not such a danger, but like a lot of people in Louisiana, for instance, don't have birth certificates and don't have access to get new ones because Hurricane Katrina wiped out the birth certificates. So one thing I think is interesting is if you look at the state of Arizona, they passed a law where you had to show proof of citizenship in order to vote in federal in an election. And that got taken to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said, no, you can't. This law is unconstitutional because it's saying what you need to vote in a federal election and only Congress can say that. And so they sort of halfway struck down that law. They said you can go ahead and state elections you can monitor however you want, but for federal elections, you can't require this. And so there's a very special group of people in Arizona that are registered to vote but don't have access to a birth certificate or a passport. And so that's about 45,000 registered voters in Arizona that they do not have access to documents. I'm not saying they don't have their documents. I'm not saying that they're too dumb to get one. I'm saying that they just don't exist. They do not have birth certificates. So they just have to swear that they're citizens the way that you do everywhere right now. That is about 1.04% of voters in Arizona. They just don't have that. And so if you were to take that same percentage and apply that nationwide, it comes out to about 1.8 million voters. There roughly, give or take, there are about 1.8 million Americans that are actual citizens. We're not talking about voting illegally or whatever. There are about 1.8 million Americans that just don't have birth certificates. And I'm not saying they're too dumb to get them. I'm not saying, you get all this stuff. Oh, you're saying black people are too stupid to get birth certificates. No, I'm not. I'm not saying anything at all about black people. I am saying there are some people that just simply do not have birth certificates. And having a birth certificate should not be a prerequisite to vote. You're a baby. What are you supposed to do? Demand the doctor write out a birth certificate? Like you don't have any control over that. You tell the fire, don't burn down the hospital. You've done nothing. There's no fault of your own. You just simply don't have a birth certificate. So why should those people be disenfranchised? Why do you want to disenfranchise 1.7 million Americans simply because they don't have a birth certificate? That's the real issue on that. Everything else is just fodder for arguments. But there are people that don't have birth certificates, and those people should be allowed to vote. Tell me how they can vote. There's other things like Brett was on here. I don't know if he's home yet. There's another thing where it can be really hard to get a birth certificate if you don't have an ID, because you need the ID to get the birth certificate, but you need the birth certificate to get the ID. So it's like you get in a catch-22, and it's called an ID trap. It's a terrible place to be. I've been in one too. It took me about 6 months to get out of it. So anyway, I just say, how do I deal with this on a daily basis? I try to stay grounded in facts. And then sometimes I just try and not pay attention to politics for a day or two. Because sometimes it gets terrible. Like right now, where I hate war. There's no reason for this Iran war. And when I see people defending it by Iran is bad, that doesn't, like, two wrongs don't make a right. America, oh, sorry, not you read your comment there, John. Is that why Trump is begging for those countries for help? Yes. And has no idea how NATO is supposed to work. America can be kicked out of NATO if Trump is stupid enough. Yeah, I mean, if he's sabotaging NATO to the point that America is a detriment, the Constitution has nothing to do with funding TSA or Coast Guard. Right, and neither does the shutdown. The shutdown is about the Fourth Amendment. The Democrats don't want to fund DHS because it's the only way they can stop ICE from doing their illegal searches. All the Republicans have to do is say no more of these administrative warrants. Administrative warrants are a violation of the Fourth Amendment. All Republicans have to do is say ICE can't go into your house without a judicial warrant, the way the Constitution requires. That's all they have to do. That's why Democrats are perfectly willing to fund TSA and the Coast Guard independently. Republicans won't, because they know that if that's the only leverage they have to keep ICE going and kicking down doors unconstitutionally. Trump blab Neil Dunn would be dead in June. Yes, that's the guy. And then they were like yucking it up, right? They're just like that whole thing was so bizarre. And even Mike Johnson, like, it was almost like, that's too much mushroom for me. USA is strong, but it can't take over the world. Dirty, comments like this are just kind of ignorant. USA is strong, but it can't take over the world. Yeah. Canada. Do you support illegal activity by the ICE? Do you support the Constitution? Like, see, you need to watch. I need to go on with this so that Democrats love Nova. This is not true. China and Russia aren't NATO. They're NATO's enemies. They're close. Anyway, nobody's done as much for China as Donald Trump. Without America, Russia, or China could. Yes, because China's sitting around waiting to try and conquer Europe. How do you get an ID or driver's license without a birth certificate? That's the conundrum, John. That's like, you need the license to get the birth certificate, but you need the birth certificate to get the license. And so that's the thing is, sometimes people just lose their birth certificate. There's other things. I have a lot of problems with the SAVE Act, but one of them is just the very principle that you have to have this proof of citizenship, and then they define the proof of citizenship in certain ways that some people just can never do that. And so my only question is, if you are an American citizen and you've never committed a crime, should you be allowed to vote? Should there be any other conditions on your being allowed to vote? Not, like everything else is just nonsense. Should American citizens be allowed to vote, or should only some citizens be allowed to vote? Gary's just listening. Nobody is right in this war we have. So you're basically non-existent. What is, I don't know what. Then how are immigrants getting a driver's license without? Because you don't need a birth certificate to get a driver's license. You need a birth certificate to get proof of citizenship. And like a driver's license is not sufficient for proof of citizenship. Hey, Harry, how you doing today? Top counterterrorism official Joe Kent. Yes. And I remember people on here sitting there saying, because I was saying that it's insane that we have, like, Iran was not a threat. And I was empirically saying that because it is obvious to anybody that pays attention to anything that Iran was not going to nuke us in a week. And I had all these people sitting there going, well, were you there for the intelligence briefing? And I'm like, I didn't need to be, but this dude gave the intelligence briefings and he says that they weren't a threat. So I'm ready for the apologies, MAGA. So, all right, we're caught up on the comments. Let me go through this to the next thing. So anyway, back to the US is just, our perspective is skewed. We have a skewed perspective of left and right. And I just wanted to go through and point out some things. I kind of compared the US to the rest of the world. To like illustrate what I mean when I say where we're at. Okay. On healthcare, this is kind of a left to right pendulum or spectrum of where different countries are. This, I had ChatGPT help me out with this. I don't know everything about all these systems, so if anything got wrong, I apologize. But the U.S. is by far the farthest right of any industrialized nation in the world when it comes to healthcare. We don't have any kind of universal healthcare policy. Easily the furthest to the right. And you can say that's good, you can say that's bad. I'm just pointing out it is the furthest to the right. Immigration. We're not the furthest to the right in terms of open versus restrictive. We're not the furthest to the right. Japan is further to the right than we are. But of the major countries, we're really far to the right. And like Japan was not a nation built on immigration. Let's be real. And remember that Japan has its own little fascist history. U.S. is next. And we actually were built on immigration. Our criminal justice system, we're way far to the right. And we'll get more into this later, but like we spend 10 times as much on, I'm sorry, that's okay. I think I said earlier we spend 10 times as much on defense spending. I meant incarceration. We spend 10 times what England does on incarceration. We have, I think, the largest prison population in the world, and not only that, we have like the third or fourth highest incarceration rate in the world. We are way insanely incarcerating people. We love to throw people in prison. Education. We are furthest to the right in terms of public, universal versus private. We have like K through 12, you can get public education, but then private education or, secondary education, even state schools now are almost prohibitively expensive, and you have to take out loans that you end up having to get an education instead of a house. Versus, some countries like Finland, where pretty much, and I wish, personally, I wish the US were there. As long as you have the ability and the ambition, go as far as you want. If you can get a PhD, help somebody get a PhD, because that PhD ends up being better for the country as a whole. I think that the more educated our people are, the more we invest in our people, the better we are as a nation. That's my view. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about, and we'll get into this more later, is freedom. And we've got two aspects of freedom, right? We've got freedom for and freedom from. And let me explain what I mean by that. Freedom from means that you're free from restrictions. You're free from barriers that allow you to live your life. And then there's freedom to, which is freedom to live your life. So, for instance, if you having Jim Crow laws, right, that stopped Black people from being able to register to vote, right? That was freedom from those laws, but then there also had to be freedom to go to the polls and vote. So those are two aspects of freedom, and they don't always coincide. And I want to talk about that more later, but we've got freedom from and freedom to, and like hate speech is a good example of that, and I'll get into that in a bit. Because sometimes freedom from can go against freedom to. One person's freedom from Jim Crow laws could be what about people that wanted to argue for freedom for Jim Crow's law? They have the freedom too, right? So now their freedom from things is actually restricting somebody else's freedom too. I hope that makes sense. I'll get into it more later. So freedom from, we're actually more liberal than most countries, but freedom to, we're actually on the other side. And I think this is one of the things, I think that Republicans and conservatives tend to be on the very strong on the freedom from side, whereas Democrats and liberals tend to be more on the freedom to side. And I think both need to be calibrated some. All right, so the US isn't the center, it's the center of our perspective. So one thing that's, I'd already mentioned this before about the map. And we need to if we want to solve real issues, we need to get beyond binary thinking, right? We look at and my binary thinking, so who was it? Somebody's like, the one of the commenters here earlier said, I mentioned that we should have the Fourth Amendment right protected, right? Like ICE just bashing down doors to issue warrants, and then somebody's like, "Oh, I guess you're just for the illegals then." And that's the kind of thinking I'm talking about. These false dichotomies, these false binaries, that if you can't both be for effective immigration laws and also for the Fourth Amendment rights. Those two things can coexist. They don't need to be a choice between the two of them. And so we talk about these things because we've been trained to talk about open borders and closed borders, not immigration. We just go along with these bogus talking points. We need to ask what works and not who is right. We need to flex our brains, and we need to become flexible in our thinking. All right. And so I'm going to catch up on some comments here. The U.S. healthcare system is a complete poop show. Like there is a privatized healthcare and then there is American healthcare. It's completely bonkers. I agree. And like I'm not even getting into the whole system today. I'm just going to talk about some of these things that we can talk about. Hopefully, and I hope we can get a discussion on the things we're talking about and not around the things we're talking about and just get into the false dichotomies and binary discussions that I'm trying to avoid. And you're lucky you didn't change addresses because then you would have a real problem. Oh, okay. He's talking about the ID. You have to pay in some hospitals in America to touch your baby, called the skin on kin. Oh my goodness. I did not know that. It's completely ridiculous that having a baby should cost $40,000. In the USA, it costs NHS like $10,000. How are you charging people $40,000 for that? And this is the deep irony of it is we don't just have the most limited healthcare in the world. We also have the most expensive. The UK and Canada has the same system. I'm pretty sure because Canada has national. Yeah, Canada has a single payer system. I'm not sure why it has Canada to the right of yeah, it's more. It's I think doesn't Japan I think has like some kind of mandatory insurance laws, but if you can't afford the insurance, they pay the insurance or something like that. I'm not sure. But we buy like it and I like I want to go in. This is actually a good topic for another show, is looking at how other countries solve healthcare, because I think we just either defend or attack whatever anybody says, but somehow it's like the one holy grail that you can't touch is like the private insurance or universal healthcare, at least in terms of the right. I sure hope something is good. It's going to get brought up because I'm really getting depressed. Okay. Primary, secondary, and college are free in the UK, but university, master's, and PhD you have to pay for. But you can get student loans off the government to pay for it. That makes sense. I mean, once you get to college, you have to pay for it. And our primary, secondary schools are getting worse and worse. They doing these things called school vouchers where you can use them to go to a private school. And so the private schools can like decide who they want. And it's an end run around segregation. And so then all you have left in the public schools is the poor black kids. And then the poor black kids don't do as well. And so then it's proof that public education doesn't work. But it's like hamstringing somebody and then saying it's proof they can't run. If an immigrant has no birth certificate and social security card, then how are they getting a driver's license? Ask them. It's not really relevant. I don't know. I don't know how they get driver's licenses. But they do, and they don't have birth certificates and social security. Well, some of them do have social security cards. You don't need to be a citizen to get a social security. And they're also, immigrants versus legal immigrants are two different categories. Like an illegal immigrant, or illegal immigrant, any kind of immigrant can still have a passport, right, and prove who they are. All you need for a driver's license is just to prove who you are. You don't need to prove that you're a citizen. You don't need to be a citizen to get a driver's license. That's my point. We just need to help each other more in everyday life than anything. And and that's, one of the more touching things that I've had happen that I've personally experienced was we had a couple of tornadoes blow through Elgin. We're a small town. It's about 9,000 people. I think maybe it's up to 14,000. It's been growing. But a relatively small town. And we had a couple of tornadoes blow through here a few years ago, wiped out a lot of houses. And so you had a group of people that went around and just voluntarily went and helped people clean up their houses and stuff. And, you know, clear up the debris, get order restored to their lives. And then there was this food truck called Smash Burgers, and they saw what was going on. They said, people need to eat. So they went and they bought a bunch of hot dogs, and they went and then, you know, they made some chili. They went around and they just gave away free chili dogs and whatnot to the people that were doing this work. And so I went to the farmer's market, and at the farmer's market, they're always there every week, but they don't charge prices at the farmer's market. It's like pay what you need, pay what you want. And so I went up there. I had never heard it. I heard they had really good smash burgers. I had never had one of them before. So I went to go get a smash burger, and they're like, sorry, we don't have any smash burgers today. We only have chili dogs. And then they explained the whole thing, and, you know, that they had spent like $600 on hot dogs, and they just needed to get rid of the hot dogs. And told me the story and everything. So I thought that was pretty cool. And this lady was standing behind me in line. And so she gets her order and she goes to pay for it. And they ask her, how much do you want to pay for that? She just had one chili dog. She says, $600. So I got my chili dog. And I went and sat in my car and I cried. Nobody asked before they jumped out of their truck and started helping people, who did you vote for? They didn't drive past, you know, signs they disagreed with. That lady didn't care which politics you had. And it just really struck me. We need to get past treating people as people based on who they voted for, and whether or not people deserve to be loved based on who they are voting for. Like, I agree with that. And we're not doing a very good job of it as a society. We are inherently tribal, and I think it's part of our humanity. And sorry, didn't plan to get emotional. There was an experiment this psychology professor did, and he went. It was the first day of class. He hadn't met any of the students. All he did, he went in and he put the numbers 1 and 2 on every single desk and just scattered them. And then he was intentionally 15 minutes late for class. So he comes into class and he's like, was there a number on your desk? And everybody's like, yeah. And he's like, okay, who is the number ones? And the left side of the room raises their hand and he says, okay, who had number 2? And the right side of the room raises their hands. They had just automatically looked at the cards and then just assumed that they were supposed to be segregated by their numbers. That where, you know, and his whole thing was we are tribal by instinct. We look for a reason to group and to separate. We need to stop doing that. And we need to start looking for a reason to agree with each other and not looking for a reason to disagree with each other. We need to find a starting point and say, yes, America, everybody should have a reason, should be able to get health care. Or we need to do something about our immigration laws. And so what I want to do today is I want to help us start getting to the real conversations. So that we're not debating ideas. Because right now we're not debating ideas, we're defending groups. Or another way I have of saying this, every stupid debate is a smarter conversation we're not having. So I hope we can do this today. I hope we can just not have stupid debates, but actually have smart conversations about what the real issues are and how we can actually solve those real issues. All right, I'm going to go through and look at some of these comments. I sure hope something good. Oh, all right, so we got, okay, primary. I already read that one. So yeah, Gary, sorry. That was a good comment. You won't be muted. In 16 states, undocumented immigrants can get driver's license. Yes, I don't understand the fixation with that. Second problem, where I was born, my birth records were handwritten. When they were scanned in digitally by SSA, I was assigned the wrong birth date also. Terrible problem. Were you older? Are you older or younger? Did they give you more years or take them away? So I didn't have my IDs or SSI card, and I also could not even get proof because my birthday was incorrect, and I didn't even know. I had luck that, oh, so you couldn't get your birth certificate because you have to tell them your birth date, and then because your birth date was wrong in the system. Wow. What chaos. And so it's not that you're too stupid to know when you were born. Like, I get so tired of the, oh, you're saying people are too stupid comment. Once I got SSA card and all the other dominoes fell into place, but 9 months of hell to fix it. It's Republicans on Obamacare. Sorry, autocorrect said SSI. It was supposed to be SSA. For 90% of the U.S. public, having a brain is difficult, let alone using it. That's the dirty trick. He's taking healthcare away from his own party. Well, we'll get into that in a bit, but the healthcare, the Medicaid, we're talking about Medicaid, not ACA today. Although I would say student loan system in the UK is in dire need of reform, especially for Plan 2, where unless you were in 60, where you earn £60,000 a year, even if you are doing repayments, your debt grows. That's part of the whole student loan forgiveness thing that everybody got upset about here with Joe Biden. You had people that were like there was like a lot that went into that wasn't talked about. But like, I don't remember the specifics, but like you had to be paying on time, at least the minimum every month, and not miss payments, no late payments for like 20 years. And there were people that had been doing that, like making the minimum payment for 20 years, and they owed as much or more as what they borrowed, even though they had already paid back twice their student loan. And so, and then people were like, well, they shouldn't have taken it out in the first place. And it's like, you're blaming them for receiving the loan. Why is it legal to offer people loans like that? The problem is the system is broken. Although in the UK, at least they do wipe it out for you. Although in the UK, the government doesn't hit you with a tax ban for giving you the privilege of not being in debt for the rest of your life, unlike in the USA where you guys do it like a tax bond from the IRS. Life needs higher character count. We got all kinds of characters in the comments section, Brett. I'm on a roll. That's an awesome story. Kept someone that stepped up to help others when they needed it. It was a bunch of people. That's what There were the people that stepped up to help the people whose houses were destroyed. There were people that stepped up to help the people that were helping people. And there was somebody to help the people that was helping the people that were helping the people. So and nobody cared about politics. It was not political. It's just humanity. And we need to look at everything from that. Like when I say we need a common starting point, I just wish that could be our starting common point. It's just, let's do what is best for other humans. Where has all the comedians gone from yesterday? I heard there used to be Pell Grants. I think Trump canceled them. My birth date was 5 days different than the actual day of the month. Wow. So are you 5 days older or 5 days younger? Did you do you celebrate 2 birthdays now? Tribal thinking blinds all who can't cast past their tribal instincts, even to the point of non-critical and logical thinking. Like, here's an example of tribal thinking. Is people that were no new wars. Kamala Harris is going to get us into Iran. Then as soon as Donald Trump invades Iran, they're like, oh, he said no new forever wars. Like, if you made that pivot, that's tribal thinking. Even politicians are affected. Especially politicians sometimes. CF Mike Johnson. They want to believe so hard they are right, they make idiotic arguments, such as believing that Guam could tip over and capsize. I had not heard that one. What was the guy that was there was a guy, I can't remember who it was, that was saying that the internet was a bunch of tubes. Politicians aren't affected by tribal thinking. They're told what to do by the party. So let's see if we can have some conversations. Just kind of looking at what's the goal, who is affected, what are the trade-offs. Like, sometimes we do need to think there's trade-offs, right? If some people will say, if you have universal health care, that means that we're going to have to pay for that with our taxes. And yes, we are. But I'm willing to make that trade-off. Like, I am willing to have my tax money go to pay for people's health care. And if somebody's not, then there's also trade-offs for that. And we'll get into that in a bit. Like, there's trade-offs either way. So we'll start with the Medicaid conundrum. All right. Here, let me enlarge that a little bit. So you have a payment structure. The hospitals receive Medicaid payments, not people, right? It's not people get Medicaid. I mean, people receive Medicaid, right? But they don't get Medicaid checks in the mail. The actual money goes to hospitals. So they have, some sort of condition. They have appendicitis. Let's say somebody gets appendicitis and they're on Medicaid. And so they go to the hospital and they get treated. They get their appendectomy and then they get sent home. Medicaid pays for that. Medicaid does not pay them for that. Medicaid pays the hospital for that. The hospitals need that money. Especially some of these rural hospitals, like 40% of their revenue comes from Medicaid. And I said rural hospitals, not urban hospitals, rural hospitals. So what happens if you cut those people off of Medicaid? The hospitals still have to do that procedure, right? That poor person that can't afford the bill still needs to get the appendectomy because that's the law. You can't turn somebody away from life-saving care because they don't have insurance. And I think that's a good law. But then the hospital has to do that and they have to eat that loss. when they eat that loss, it's not just the poor guy that doesn't get the appendectomy or that got the appendectomy that suffers. It's the hospital that suffers. And when the hospital starts losing significant amounts of its money in revenue because of things like that, the hospital has to close. I think there's already hundreds of hospitals that are signaling they're going to have to close because of the recent Medicaid cuts. When those hospitals close, it doesn't just affect the people that have Medicaid. It doesn't just affect the people that were scamming Medicaid or whatever. This kind of silly idea that there are these, kids in their 30s, in 20s and 30s that are staying at home and just scamming the system and playing video games in their mom's basement or whatever kind of nonsense the Republicans were trying to sell. They're not the ones that are going to suffer. They don't need health care anyway. The people that suffer are the ones that A, need health care, and B, the hospitals. And then when those hospitals close, it doesn't matter if you have insurance or not. It doesn't matter if you're on Medicaid or not. If the hospital's closed for anyone, the hospital is closed for everyone. Every single person that lives in that community no longer has access to that hospital if that hospital is closed. I don't care if you have the most supreme golden super deluxe maximum best insurance money can buy. That insurance is useless. If the hospital is closed, you're going to have to go to another town. And a lot of times that other town is 40 or 50 miles away. I think it's already like for rural Americans, it's already like a 20, 25 minute drive to the nearest hospital. You start closing down half of them, you're turning that into a 40, 50 minute drive, maybe even more. And some places it's already begun experiencing that. And so if you're having a miscarriage, you're having a heart attack, you have a wound, a serious wound or injury, all of those things affect, every minute counts. It's not just, oh, well, that's what the poor people get. They shouldn't have tried to scam the system. We try to make it out that only those poor people are the ones that are going to suffer. Everyone suffers. And that's what I mean by trade-offs. There are people that have done nothing wrong that are going to suffer because of these Medicaid cuts. So when you just bring up, oh, well, these people are scamming the system, it's not those people I'm worried about. Guy that's sitting there allegedly collecting Medicaid while he's playing video games, you don't even collect Medicaid. You only benefit from Medicaid if you go to the hospital. And then the hospital's the one that gets the check, not the person. It's such a weirdo way to look at it. So the question is then, what do we do about that? The question shouldn't be whether or not we should cut Medicaid. The question should be, one, how do we keep rural hospitals from closing? What can we do about that? I think the bill had $50 billion or 50 million, I can't remember. But the amount of money that they have earmarked for the rural hospitals is only like a tiny percentage, like 10% of what they actually need to stay open. It's like putting a Band-Aid on an amputated arm. And saying, well, we gave you a Band-Aid. So, like, that's the conversation we need to have. Not whether or not to cut Medicaid. Not who's scamming the system. We had all of this just stuff about people scamming Medicaid. And yeah, fraud is bad. We should go after people that have fraud. But that's not the conversation about Medicaid that we need to have. The conversation we need to have about Medicaid is how do we keep hospitals from closing? Because actual people need actual health care. and actual lives are going to be sacrificed because those hospitals are closed. It's not like, do you see what I'm saying? I hope we can actually get some responses to this line of reasoning. It's not about bad people scamming your money. It's about actual good people, decent people needing health care and having access to it without having to drive 100 miles. Denmark is the happiest country in the world and has some of the highest taxes in the world, but it also has one of the best healthcare systems, one of the best safety nets, and one of the best age-old pension schemes for old pensions in the world, in their country, in the world. And that's where I'm talking about, if I was mentioning earlier about the freedom from and the freedom to. Why is Denmark one of the happiest countries in the world? Because of the freedom to. They have the freedom to get healthcare. They have the freedom to get educated. They have the freedom to retire and actually be retired. They have the freedom to enjoy their senior years. Like that, the freedom to is an equally important freedom, but we don't acknowledge those. We don't even care about those freedoms in America. We just cavalierly dismiss raising the Social Security age to 72 so that you only have like 4 years after you retire. It's like, and then you got to work until you're too old to work, and then you're too old to do anything else. The Danish government has very little regulation on the private sector, but what most conservatives fail to tell you is that Denmark has very powerful trade unions that negotiate regulation with companies and ensure workers have good working conditions, paid holiday sick leaves, etc. I think this is my biggest issue with the Democrats, is that we have completely abandoned unions. Unions are the working man's leverage. That is how we fight against the corporate elite. It's through unions. Unions are our leverage, and unions are capitalism, not communism, by the way. It's supply and demand, right? We won't supply you unless you give us what we demand. In other European countries where you don't have very powerful trade unions, the government steps in and regulates the market for you. In the US, you have the worst of both worlds, where the government never regulates and your trade unions are basically pointless and do nothing. And where the government steps in, and I do mean you, Joe Biden, steps in and takes the side of the people that are trying to bust the unions. I'm talking about the train, in case anybody's wondering. That made me mad. I do criticize Democrats too. I know people don't believe me when I say that, but I do. I do believe there needs to be a good federal healthcare system. However, I believe there needs to be some strict restrictions on who receives healthcare so people can't abuse the system. How would, what does abuse the system mean? Like, what does that mean? And then what restrictions on people who receive healthcare? Like, I appreciate that you are coming in and actually talking about the actual thing, and I appreciate that. But I'm wondering, like, this kind of begs the question: is what restrictions and on whom? And what is abuse? What does abuse the system mean? Because some people could be like, say somebody has long COVID and they can't work, but they can't get disability either. We have another kind of trap, a disability trap, where to get disability, you're not allowed to work for a year. Like, you actually cannot work for a year, but you have to keep yourself alive. And you've got healthcare problems. And because you have healthcare problems, you need to get healthcare. And to get the healthcare, you need to have a job. So you've got another catch-22 here, where you have to work to pay for the bills, to treat your disability, but you can't work because of your disability, and you can't get disability because you're working to pay for your disability. Do you see what I'm saying? So how do you iron all that out? And what does abuse the system mean? Because some people would say abusing the system means sitting around not working. But what if you can't work? However, I am not a politician, so I do not know what restriction. Well, there you go. Should have read your next comment. You already answered my question. When it starts affecting outpatient mental health facilities and people who can't get their medication, what happens to all of them on the street? Right. And then what is the downstream effect of that? What about not just those people, but, the people that they affect? Do you think politicians, do they have the tens? You'd think that they would. I don't know what some of these staff members do, because they don't seem to really care what anything is. Like, you never, like when I don't expect politicians to read every single bill of every single law they vote for, but they do have staff, and they should make sure their staff, at least somebody, divide it up into parts and say, you read these 50 pages, everybody reads these 50 pages, and come back and brief me on it in the morning. I mean, no disrespect, please rewrite it to be more comprehensive for my smooth brain. I am a very patient person. I'd imagine working in a rural hospital, you must have some substantial amount of free time. I've never worked in a rural hospital, but I don't know if that's true or not. I would if there is somebody here, I would imagine if you work in a rural hospital, you don't have free time, because they're not. Right now, I think if you work in a hospital at all, there's no free time. There's both there's a nursing shortage and a doctor shortage. Try getting a doctor's appointment in Elgin. Most, I think, I can't. It's so hard to even find a doctor that's taking new patients. Medicaid is the low-income insurance that buys only generic medication and basic health care. Very basic. Nobody's gaming the system on that. The only ones that are gaming the system on that are providers, and that's one thing that's a big thing. Like, provider fraud is a big thing. User fraud is negligible, almost non-existent. And then if you make too much money, you can't get Medicaid, and that's where you start getting into the ACA. The left and right work together. Just look at the past 30 years. Politics have. I don't agree with that, Nick. I don't think that the left and right work together. I don't think that Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and Donald Trump are on the same page on anything. Like, I think that's an oversimplification, and I think it kind of, like, they obviously, we don't have a partisan divide because both sides are saying the same thing. But we're not even saying the same thing on the war in the Middle East and illegal immigration. I just Googled Medicaid won't even buy partial dentures. Yes, unless you have 8 occlusions or less. How does one chew food with even 9 teeth? I have so many Kentucky meth head jokes. Thanks, Kelly, for sharing the hot dog story. I love that story. Isn't that a good story? Charlie Kirk merely suggested Israel may have allowed the terrorist attack to happen so they could retaliate. Yeah, I don't think they're connected. I think that Charlie Kirk died because a guy had a trans woman he was in love with and got tired of, and Nick Fuentes, follower, by the way. I think we tend to create conspiracy theories and make coincidences plans. As I think unions are good, but I also believe unions need to have limits. I have worked at places where I could not talk to my supervisor without permission from my team lead. Yeah, I've worked in places like that too. But it's usually not the union that is creating that problem. I had a situation like that, and we didn't even have a union yet. Like, we were forming a union. It wasn't a union role. It was the role of the company that I worked for, Accenture. I think the main problem is the opposite. They refuse to work together on anything, and when they do, the bills come out toothless and pointless. And I think that's because they are not doing what I'm talking about here. We aren't looking at trying to solve problems here. Like, I think in Denmark, and Harry, I forget where you're at, we're not looking to solve problems in America. We're looking to just get our policies through. No, if you look into it, there's a slot that doesn't add up around the shooting. So he disassembled the rifle on top of the roof, hopped down, left his screwdriver, and then they found the rifle fully put together in the woods. I'm in the UK. UK. That's it. To be honest, most of these problems we are facing are geographical. I think there's geographical and demographic, and there's some related to what you're saying. Some of the policies affect certain areas more than other areas, and then other areas it's more impact. Like right now, but sometimes it doesn't even make sense. Like right now, climate change should be like the number one thing in Florida's mind, right? Like Florida is arguably the most affected state by climate change, and their reaction is to pretend it's not real. And England and Great Britain and the UK are all separate entities. Yes. It's hard to keep that in mind. But I think so. England is the actual island, right? And then the Great Britain is like Wales, Scotland, Ireland, and England. And then the UK is like all the territories and whatnot also. Do I have that right? They do not all refer to the same thing. I was shocked a couple of days ago when Nick Fuentes said everyone should vote Democrat or they are going to do somersaults on Trump's penis. That blew my mind. Is that real? I wouldn't have believed it if I didn't see it myself. What does that even mean? How does one do somersaults on Trump's penis? By the way, just completely unrelated, but not completely unrelated. Just interesting bit of trivia here. Did you know that magic mushrooms grow on poop or near poop? I'm just saying. That's not entirely unrelated to Donald Trump never getting his diapers changed. The fact that Barack Obama is George Washington's third cousin, eighth removed, is wild. That's not far apart. Dude, I'm related to George Washington. I'm related to George Washington, Rosa Parks. It's actually, if you do one of those family tree things, you'll find out. I'm related to Muhammad Ali. I have a pretty crazy, and I think like some other presidents too. I can't remember all of them. FDR, I'm related to FDR. So England is one country on the island of Great Britain, and then Great Britain. Okay. Yes. So England is one country on the island of Great Britain. That's it. And then Great Britain is the main island, while the UK is everything put together. Right. Okay. So So I shouldn't have said England is the island. It's part of the island. And then Wales, Scotland, and England are the island. And then Ireland is a different island, I think. Third cousin, eighth removed is close. That's not far away. No, it's all how, like, I don't know exactly how far away Washington is, but that's like basically where mine's at. It's eighth removed is like that, like eighth removed is a long way away. For we are all related somehow if you go back far enough. Yeah. All right, so let's go back to, so that's the Medicare conundrum, and this is what I mean by trade-off. Is it's not just if you take away Medicaid from the people that don't deserve it, you have to understand people that deserve healthcare are also going. Even if you want to dig down and say no, they don't deserve it, but if you take Medicaid away from the people you insist don't deserve it, you're taking away Medicaid from people that do deserve it, and you're taking away healthcare from people that actually pay for insurance also. So there's a trade-off there. Is it worth the trade-off? Like, that's where we should have the beginning of that conversation. Like, how much does it matter to you that somebody doesn't get something they don't deserve? Does it matter enough to you that somebody else doesn't get something they deserve? So now let's talk about the incarceration problem. I think most people would agree we are spending too much money on prisons. This is number of people incarcerated per 10,000 people, I think. 10,000. The U.S. is, our incarceration is 540. We're the fourth highest in the world. Second is Cuba at 750. El Salvador is first at 1,000. We're at 540. But like, look at UK, it's 140. And UK is right pretty, it's actually more than most of Europe. And why do we have to have so many people in prison? Let's look at how much money we spend. Okay. This is how much money the federal government spends on incarceration. Is about over $80 billion a year. I think it's almost $90 billion a year. That's close to what we spend in education. That's for Pell Grants and scholarships and whatnot. Infrastructure, bridges, roads. This is per year. And the energy there, that's clean energy. We're spending as much on federal prisons as we are on clean energy or infrastructure. We've got bridges literally falling apart. And we're spending all of this money on sending people to prison. And not everybody in prison needs to be in prison, let's be honest. Oh, whoops, that's the same. Oh, man. Okay. I think I accidentally did the same thing. I meant to have a different chart. I deleted the wrong slide here. So I'll just have to wing this one. The alternative to, first of all, only like 40% of people that are incarcerated right now are guilty of violent crimes. And even a lot of so-called violent crimes aren't necessarily violent, like burglary or something. It's not really a violent crime. And there's not no danger to society if those people are, incarcerated at home. Like, I'm not saying murderers should be given an ankle bracelet, but if somebody's being incarcerated, because they had a meth problem, slap an ankle bracelet on them and monitor them. It costs 10 times as much money to incarcerate somebody as it does to monitor them on a ankle bracelet. It's like $4,700 a year to incarcerate somebody at home. It's $50,000 a year to incarcerate somebody in prison. And not only that, the recidivism rates are want to say 56% for people that are in prison. They're only 40% for people that have at-home monitoring. And even that's a little bit sketchy because it could be actually lower, because once you start getting the at-home monitoring, it gets easier to do it because you don't have to worry about the cost of prisons. So a lot of people that are at-home monitoring might not even be getting sentences at all. So wait, let me just, there we go. I'm glad I checked. So this is what I was just saying. Prison, $50,000 a year, home 47%, and it was 58 to 42%. Recidivism. That's not an easy word to say. But anyway, we should look at part of our whole incarceration system and how we view all of that. A big part of what we should be doing is, do we really need to send everybody to prison? We have other things related to our criminal justice system that also need work. But that's just one thing I thought of, that maybe we could get some groundwork that not everybody that, had a drug problem actually needs to go to jail, where there's a chance that they're going to become worse criminals, instead of just sending them to, home. Or, hey, send them to a rehab center. Like, maybe we should start thinking about alternative ways that are cheaper and more humane, that are treating people like people. And I'm not saying we need to give murderers warm fuzzy hugs, but maybe not everybody that had a meth slip up needs to have the rest of their lives destroyed by it. Okay. The only USA president not from English royalty is Martin Van Buren. I'm also related to Henry VIII. Maybe I should become president. Martin Van Buren, by the way, he is considered by historians to be the ugliest president. They say that if he could never win in modern politics, because once TV was invented, he would have been unelectable. He was a pretty homely dude. And I think he was short too. With the CGP, and by the way, another commonality, I think almost all presidents have been at least 6 feet tall. Martin Van Buren was like 5'7". What the GCP gray video on the UK and the EU, it will blow your watch the GCP gray video on the UK and the EU. It'll blow your mind how complicated and convoluted our systems are. When I lived in Florida, I haven't heard. I'll take a gander. When I lived in Florida, Port St. Lucie, and then West Palm Beach, all the cow farms at night have people scouring them for illegal. Yeah, I mean that's where you get them. It's in the cow poop. I always say Donald Trump's like I call him a poop paradox, because the poop never starts coming out of either end, and he's never any less full of poop. We definitely need overhaul of the healthcare system entirely. I agree, and we need to look at what do we want. And I think the one fundamental question we should have is healthcare a right or a privilege? Do we as a society want to just say, you know what, people should have health care? We need to address the mental health crisis, and that'll lead to less people being arrested. That's a big part of it. I agree with that. Man, I am so happy because this is what I was hoping would happen. Like, we need to have conversations like this. We need to stop arguing and start talking. Thank you, Nick. That is a great point. The mental health crisis will definitely lead to lower incarceration rates. Great comment. I'm happy. Thank you for the conversations. I hope you all have a lovely day. Hope you do too. The wife is giving me the stink eye. Well, that is, can't avoid that forever. Our prisons are full to the brim, to the point where the government has to release 9,000 people early to make space. Yeah. Like, that means we have too many people in prison. If they're literally overflowing, we literally have too many people in prison. And not everybody in there needs to be in there. That's weird. Okay. Literally to the point now where some sentences are imposed by a judge, but then by law, that's divided by 3. Wow, I did not know this. So, for example, manslaughter can result in up to 26 years in prison. But after 13 years, the remaining 13 years are to be suspended prison time, where you have an ankle monitor instead of being in jail. Yeah. And that's like if you had more people that didn't have violent crimes that they were serving and filling up that cell space than the people that were doing things, serving time for things like manslaughter. They could actually finish out their time as sentenced. Yeah. That I remember when that happened. And it's also very strongly correlates with the homeless or unhoused epidemic. I guess we're calling it unhoused now. Not saying mental institutions were being ran right, but defunding them may not have been the answer. Yeah, a lot of the argument and logic behind some of these things is just, oh, people don't deserve this. And it's like some people would rather have like one person not getting, like, if one person is getting free stuff that they shouldn't, it's okay if 9 people aren't getting the free stuff that they should. I guess we need a full overhaul of the criminal system also. Yes, we do. I haven't gotten into immigration yet. Pretty much the whole country needs an overhaul, including scrapping the Second Amendment. That's an argument. I won't even say an argument. That's a discussion for another day. United States, we have more people and ankle bracelets than any other state. These people have committed some bad crimes. I think you mean we have more incarcerated people than any other country. Is that what you mean? But not everybody, like I said, only 40%. Only 40% actually have committed violent crimes. And even of those people, not all of them actually were violent. It's just the way they're classified. Do not vote in the midterms. And if you do vote Democrat. Fornicate this. Your options are vote Democrat or do somersaults on Trump's penis. Wow. Is Nick Fuentes mad about the Iran war? Is that what I know? I know there's a MAGA contingency that is upset about that. I think it's already the right for militia to bear arms, isn't it? I'm pretty sure all the National Guards have it. I don't want to get sidetracked, but there is a very warped version of the Second Amendment that gets cosplayed as reality these days. The Second Amendment does not apply to individuals. I think we're on the same page. Each prisoner in prison is approximately $80,000 to $100,000 per year. If they would just give that money to the prisoner, I don't think there would be a crime. If the government wants you dead, you're dead, and your little handgun isn't going to do much against the government tanks and airplanes. No. Healthcare cannot be considered a human right due to the fact that it requires. No, that's not true. Because as long as that other person is getting paid, it doesn't mean that. Like, what is that even supposed to mean? Nobody's being asked to provide it for free. We're just saying that the government pays for it. I think gun ownership should be treated like driving a car. You need to take a class on and pass a test before being able to buy a gun. It is far too easy to own a rifle. No black hosts. I'm sorry, it's my show. I'm the only host. I don't know how to be black some days, because if you a felon, you can't protect yourself. Can you imagine if Bernie were elected in 2016? If Hillary were elected in 2016? Or if Al Gore were elected in 2000, for that matter. I hope they gave up, or one more, if Kamala Harris were elected in 2024. I hope the Republicans have only won a majority of the vote one time since 1988. And the one time they did win the majority of the vote, they won it with W's second term, when he wouldn't have gotten a majority of the vote if he had lost his first term. Like, he wouldn't have run again. So I find that fascinating. I hope they give up on proven citizenship to vote and instead require IQ tests before voting. MAGA wouldn't even get in the door. I'd be worried about that, because you start getting back into it. I mean, like, I know you're joking, but like Jim Crow laws. What I think they should do is, I think that if you're going to run for federal office, you should take the citizenship test. I don't mean prove your citizen. I mean, take the actual test that citizens have to, or that immigrants have to take, and post your score. Actually let people know how you scored on the immigration test. But I think, you should at least have enough knowledge of the Constitution to run the country, as somebody needs to have to become a citizen of the country. That is the stupidest. Oh, you're talking about most prisons in the United States are now profit. I don't know what was the stupidest thing you've ever heard. I don't know who G-Rocket. Okay, anyway. Most prisons in the United States are now for profit, privatized. It's their best interest to give the least amount of food and human dignity for profitability. Yep. And that's a big part of the problem, is we need to take the profit out of incarceration. We need to go back. Some things are better run by the government, and one of those things is prisons. The over incarceration got steroids when we started privatizing prison systems. If somebody has become a doctor and then decides they get to pick, because what happened is, now our entire criminal justice system started getting privatized. If somebody has become a doctor and then decides they get to pick and choose who they treat, they shouldn't be a doctor in the first place. Are you? This is a non sequitur. Are you obligated to someone's labor? Do they have the freedom to choose how we provide labor to someone? No. I mean, no. If somebody is a doctor and they are getting paid for being a doctor, They don't get to decide, no, we're not going to provide service for you. That's called discrimination. That's illegal. You don't have to be a doctor, and nobody's saying they have to work for free. I don't even know where you're getting that. That's such a weird argument. Again, we are trying to have intelligent conversations here, not stupid debates. So on the foundation, your premise seems to be that nobody should have to work for free. Nobody's asking anybody to work for free. So let's move on from that. Well, you're welcome to quit, but if you're getting paid, you don't get to decide, like what happens next. You don't want to take care of black people? I caught crabs and hepatitis in jail too. No, if you become a doctor, you swear an oath that you will treat anybody. You don't get to pick and choose who you treat. And if you're seriously saying that doctors and medical staff should be allowed to pick and choose who they decide they're going to treat, that's a complete madness. Also, the government isn't going around telling people you have to be, all right. I'm sorry, Rock, I'm not reading your comments anymore. They're counterproductive. Trying to explain to my girl was the worst. Wow, I missed something. Don't they give you an inoculation? Oh, anyway, all right. Sorry, I missed something. Don't you have an inoculation option for this help? This country was founded on being able to bear arms. Well, it wasn't really. But we're not going to talk about that right now. Norway has the prison cells that are better than some people's apartments in the USA. All right, so let's go on to the next one. I know this one won't be controversial. The immigration problem. Like, I think that pretty much everybody in America agrees there are issues with immigration. Immigration is an issue. Immigration is a huge issue. But it's not just open borders like, the MAGAs would have you believe. The problem is, and it's not, oh, well, what about the people that are giving the jobs to the illegal immigrants? Because that's kind of, honestly, that's kind of bullshit too. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that word. But that's kind of crap too. That's not an accurate assessment either, because there are all kinds of issues going on, like nationally, and that have nothing to do with immigration, that are amplify and magnify the immigration issues. And I wish that we would discuss this more. One of the biggest things is that, I know people don't really connect these dots, but one of our big issues is that right now the boomers are starting to retire. And so that's requiring a reduced, we're having a smaller national labor force. And we're not reproducing, where our fertility rates and whatnot, we're not replacing the retiring workers with new workers through birth, to put it bluntly. And even if you give these like weirdo grants to babies or whatever to incentivize white women to give birth, that's not going to solve anything, because those babies aren't going to be going to work for another 18 years. Well, 12 years if the MAGAs had their way. But it's not an overnight thing. So you have these jobs that need to be done, and not the people to do them. And they tend to be what I call low-rung jobs. These are the bottom-rung jobs. These are the jobs that are lowest on the ladder. And yes, there are some Americans that also do those jobs. But you have this right now, we have a system where we have temporary workers. We ostensibly, theoretically, the way that we can fill these jobs is through legal immigrants, right? But these legal immigrants, there's two kinds of visas. There's 2A and 2B. And the 2A visas are for agriculture and the 2B visas are for non-agriculture. The 2A visas, there's no limit to them, but there's a separate set of issues. 2B visas, the issue is there's only like 44,000 of them issued every year, and there's like 9 million people doing the jobs. Or is it, I think, 7 million people doing the job. There's way more people doing the jobs than there are visas. So that's the issue with the 2B visas. The issue with the 2A visas is that the agrarian jobs, to get those, the farmer has to first advertise for the job to make sure no Americans want it. Then they have to go and they have to fill out the paperwork and pay for the paperwork. And then they have to advertise in the paper for, different, like a town, to get people from other countries to come over and do the jobs. Then they have to pay for the person to come up and do the job. Then they have to pay for the housing of the person that's doing that job. And they have to do that every single season. So if they have you have a 2-season growing year in some places, they have to pay for all that twice. And it ends up being about $7,000 more per worker to pay for all of that than it does to just hire somebody illegally. And so if you need 10 workers and you're already only making $50,000 a year, if you increase that cost by 10, that means you're going to have to pay $70,000 to make $10,000. Right? So just from the farmer perspective, you're asking them to go out of business. And then that's the way that our current immigration system is set up. You're asking temporary workers to fill a permanent need. Every single year, every single growing season, the same need is there. But you get Jose up one season, and then next season it's one. You don't have growing expertise. You have to train every set of workers every time they come up. And you have this permanent economic dependency with a temporary legal framework. That's not an immigration issue. That is an immigration law issue. We need to change the immigration policy. And then we don't worry about some of these other things that we're worried about. Okay. If we change the policy, that helps different groups of people. One, it helps the farmers, because if there is a pathway to citizenship and a permanent visa application that they can go, then Juan can come up here and then he stays for 5 years and he grows with the farm. And after 5 years, Farmer Bob is like, dude, you're doing a great job. I'd like to promote you. And so then he evolves and, the farm grows and everything like that. The farmer actually benefits. The immigrant actually benefits, because the immigrant that's up here and he's working legally, he's not, like I always hear these Republicans say, oh, you're for, who's going to take care of our cotton, as though they're trying to equate me with a slave owner. Because I think that immigrants should be able to work for a living. That actually protects the worker from, being taken advantage of. They can get, the same kind of rights as domestic workers. And it protects the domestic workers because the farmers are not paying the immigrant workers under the table anymore. So then there is, especially when you're talking about the bottom rung jobs, there is a kind of wage suppression that goes with our current system, where undocumented migrants are taking are weighing down the pay for domestic workers. But you solve all of those problems. You make it profitable for the workers, you make it profitable for the owners, and you make it profitable for the domestic workers as well. That and then that, like, solves a whole bunch of other issues related with immigration. But that's just one idea, That's just my idea. Just let and then with the non-farm workers, the construction workers, and everything like that, just increase the number. Just allow more people to have legal pathways to citizenship. Our country worked by having people come over from other countries, taking these low-rung jobs and doing them well. And that is how our country got to where it is. It's been that way since our founding. Like from the Irish, before we even became a country, and then throughout our history, the Irish have come, the Chinese and the Spanish and the freed slaves. They built the railroads. The Italian immigrants came over and they built the skylines in New York City. We have been a prosperous nation because we have always had immigrants come and take these bottom rungs of the ladder and then climb their way up. Did you know that the children of immigrants are more than twice as likely to start a business as children of people that were born here? There's something. Nobody believes in the American dreams as much as the people that dreamed enough to come over here and renew their lives. Those are some of the best Americans you can find, is people that chose to be Americans. All right, let's take a look at some of the comments here. All right. Okay. So some laughy faces here. I don't know what the laughy faces are about. Oh, well, have a good one. I missed something. Peace out. Bye. Clean smoke. I don't know what's going on with. So Kelly, me and Grok are arguing about this stupid idea. Okay, so yeah. It's all about torture now. It's always cold and the food sucks. We don't even get salt and pepper. Pepper could be made into an assault weapon. Okay. Capsicum boiled down. Something is coming. I can't see what that is. What is that? Robots are coming. Oh, the bots are coming. I'm not fluent in emoji. I'm too old for that. Nails can be made into a bomb. Most things can be made into weapons. What's your point? There's some kind of conversation going on about, is somebody in prison? Was Nate? Anyway. I was getting out in 2 weeks. Oh, Lukey was in 2 weeks before I was asked for the kitchen. No, I didn't cook. Are you out yet? The point is probably security staff said pepper is contraband because it can be turned into bootleg tear gas. I don't know. Well, because you can assault somebody with it. Get it? Assault. Probably fear. I'm sorry. That was terrible. That was terrible. But you're gonna go with the pepper as a weapon. You got to go. Like you can assault somebody with the packet of salt. Probably fear blowing into the officer's eyes during a walk in a block or something. I have several friends that are DPL members. Pepper spray is the thing. I get it. We used ramen noodle packs for flavor. Ramen. Oh no. One of my friends, Mancha, that means stain in Spanish. He would tell me about the pizza crust made of ramen noodles. Whoa. Have you touched on the big resignation day? Yeah, the one dude. Yeah, we talked about. You're talking about the guy that didn't go along with the Iran as a threat thing. I mentioned earlier. I think it was read. I'm not sure. Yeah, I read that. Yeah, I think I talked about that a little bit, like at the very, very outset before you got here. But yeah, the can't think of his name. I think he's like on the Tucker Carlson side of things, where he's mad that about the whole no new wars thing. But it's what I was saying about that is, I remember when I was mentioning that Iran was by no means a threat. There was like I laugh at people that think that we were going to be a nuclear wasteland right now under Sharia law if Donald Trump hadn't invaded when he did. And then MAGAs were like, "Oh, I guess you've read the security briefings now, so you know what was in them." And it's like, well, the guy that was giving them just resigned. I wonder what Tulsi thinks of that. She hasn't. Now that I think about it, I'm wondering. I don't think Putin is happy about it. So if Putin's not happy about it, I wouldn't be surprised if Tulsi's not happy about it. I wouldn't be surprised if this guy's resignation is because Putin told him to. That Kent guy let the cat out of the bag. This whole imminent danger of Iran was garbage. Total non sequitur, but I like non sequiturs. This is a little bit of trivia for you, in case you didn't know. You know there's this. Have you ever heard the idiom "buy a pig in a poke"? That's because there used to be a there would be a scam that they would have like in the Middle Ages, where somebody would grab a cat and they put it in a poke, like a bag, and they seal it up, and then they would go and they would tell people, "Hey, look, I've got this pig here. I'll sell it to you for $5, or not dollars, but whatever the coin was." And then you'd but you can't look at the pig until I sell it to you. And so, but it would be like this super discounted rate, kind of like some of these Facebook ads. And so you'd say, okay, well, what's the worst happens, I lose $5. And so then you'd buy the pig in a poke, and which means you're buying something sight unseen, knowing you're probably going to get ripped off. But if you were careless, you might accidentally let the cat out of the bag and blow the whole scam. Like literally let the cat out of the bag. So the buy a pig in a poke and let the cat out of the bag come from the same scam. So anyway, a little bit of trivia for you. They were feeding us that said not for human consumption. Oh, that's charming. They're feeding us food that said not. Yeah, this is what I mean. Like, where's the humanity? Like, we need to treat people like human beings. We're like, I prefer my food to be meant for human consumption. I had to do 6 months for a straw purchase. Gun charge. Same dude was harassing. I pulled out to him. Man. That's like pretty rare. Like most like straw purchases is like, I mean, I know people get prosecuted for that, but I think it's like only like 10% of like it's actually a seriously under prosecuted crime. Ghost weapons, yes, I know a few people that were selling parts to turn semi to full. They did the same, and that's one of the problems with these assault weapons bans and stuff is they're not really enforceable because they can just skirt around the law, you know, give you something that all you need is this one part and then sell the one part separately. All right. So now let's go into what I was talking about before, freedom from. So like I was saying, in case you weren't here, there's two kinds of, like we talk about freedom in two different ways, right? We talk about freedom and we, you know, and it's like, especially like the MAGAs, you know, you got the Mel Gibson with the Braveheart face paint on, freedom, you know, but like, what does freedom mean? And freedom can actually mean two things. It can mean freedom from, and it can mean freedom to. So like if you're like walking down this pathway and then this wall is in the way, that is, you need freedom from the wall. So there is something we have to talk, like, so let's talk about free speech related to this, right? And you have Karl Popper and the intolerance paradox, which let's talk about, you know, like free speech and in terms of freedom from, and look at US versus Europe in terms of hate speech laws. The intolerance paradox was basically, if you allow intolerant speech to run rampant, then eventually, you know, like you're saying, eventually other people will start to have their freedoms taken away. And then the only people left will be the people that are speaking intolerance. Kind of like what happened with World War II and Hitler, which is, you know, Popper wasn't making a hypothetical argument. He was making an observation, a historical observation. So his kind of idea, the paradox here is the one kind of tolerance that you can't tolerate is intolerance, because tolerating intolerance leads to destruction. That was his view. And it wasn't like he was saying you should go out and you should prosecute people for saying mean things. It's more about platforming. So we have like these kind of views of free speech that have been characterized as, you know, free speech issues, but they're more platforming issues. Platforming hate speech is not the same as prosecuting it, or not platforming hate speech is not the same as prosecuting it. The government can't prosecute you for saying racist things, but the government can say, we're not going to give you the biggest, nicest venue in a university so that you can say hateful, bigoted things. And, you know, and we're not going to pay for that. Like there's a difference between platforming and prosecuting, right? Or just not platforming and prosecuting. And so you have right-wing conservatives that get all upset and up in arms about, you know, oh, well, you know, this university won't platform my hate speech. Well, they don't need to. You don't need to tolerate intolerance. You don't need to elevate it. You don't need to platform it. The other side of that is you've got hate speech laws in Europe that are more strict than hate speech laws in America. So in America, there's this, you know, like the First Amendment, you can't prosecute things for things you say, at least things you say that Donald Trump agrees with anyway. that the First Amendment will you know, that whole thing is in question right now, regardless. But I'm talking about, you know, like Twitter accounts or whatever. Right now, nobody went to jail because they said things about the COVID vaccine not working. Nobody went to jail because, you know, they said something that offended somebody. People don't go to jail for that. There are stronger hate speech laws in Europe, but those hate speech laws are more protective than they are restrictive. And a lot of people here in the US, they look at those and they say those are a violation of freedom, but they're not so much a violation. In some ways, they are a limitation to some people's freedom from. Like, some people are prosecuted for saying things that are hateful in Europe, but that's because it affects other people's freedom too. And that's where you start getting into this thing I was talking about earlier, trade-offs. Like, if your freedom starts taking away from somebody else's freedom, do you have that freedom? There's this kind of old saying that your freedom ends where mine begins, or free speech for me but not for thee. If your principle changes by context, it's not principle. And I put this in here because there's this, all of a sudden, all the MAGAs that were upset that somebody could be removed from Twitter because they said a mean thing, when the federal government starts threatening to take away people's broadcast license because one of their comedians made fun of Donald Trump, where's the people talking about that? When Donald Trump says he's going to prosecute people because they were critical of his little, you know, hobby war in Iran, where's the same people that were upset about Donald Trump getting suspended from Twitter? Why are they upset that Donald Trump got removed from Twitter over January 6th, but they're not upset that he's talking about prosecuting somebody for treason because they dare criticize Donald Trump? Is free speech for everyone, or is free speech just for you? And what constitutes free speech? Does free speech mean you get to say whatever you want, and regardless of how it, you know, affects other people? Is racist speech? Can you get fired for saying racist things, or is that free speech? Like, I just feel like there is not real discussions around free speech. It's more, I get to say what I want when I want, and if I ever have to, face any consequences for them, then that's taking away my freedom. But somehow, if you know, when it's the other way around, then it's like fine. It's like these people that who was it? Nick Fuentes, maybe? I forget who. There was some Nazi guy that somebody got like punched in the face. And there was all this talk about all these right-wingers are like, you know, I don't have to agree with what you say to defend your right to say it, you know. And they're like, oh, I'm not a Nazi. But, you know, if you're, you know, Nazis have rights too, and I'll defend to the death your right to say it. Where are they now? Where are the people that were defending the Nazis' right to speech? Why are they not defending the rights of, you know, Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert? Why aren't they defending the rights of, what's his name? Lemon. It just seems that people on one side of the aisle are awfully selective on what constitutes free speech. And I tried to work through this because I think it is a very valid question. At what point does free speech go too far? And I don't think it's a question that you can be too cavalier about. But I think there is a point. You know, I think that, you know, like, for instance, we do have in our law, there are places where freedom freedom of speech goes too far. You can't slander somebody. That's a civil punishment. Anyway, this is what I mean by freedom from. Okay, then freedom to. Freedom to is some of the things we were talking about before, like Medicare or medical care. Like, right. Do you have freedom to medical care? Do you have freedom to a secondary education? Do you have freedom to a pension? Do you have freedom to retire when you're 65 or whatever? Do you have freedom to live in a house? Like, we have all of these things, and we're like freedom from prosecution. But are we free to live a life that is happy? Do we have free to live a life that is actually a life of liberty? We talk about freedom, and it's become this token word that is utterly hollow and meaningless because we don't talk about what freedom means. So I think when we talk about some of these issues, we need to actually contextualize what freedom means and have real conversations about it. Like, what is it? What do you want freedom from? And what do you want freedom to do? So, okay, Lukey's been out of jail for 3 years. I got to go get a pardon. All you got to do is just got to pay him enough money. There you go. Just paid. Yep. It's like, I don't know what the going rate is. Might be a little bit out of your league. Karl Popper, the inventor of jalapeno poppers. There you go. I think I gotta write the governor. Oh. Accidentally leave a check in the envelope. Tolerating intolerance leads to its destruction. That's why I don't have any mercy for trolls and bots. There you go. There's my intolerance meter. Brett. Kitty didn't make it today. I wonder if she's okay. Oh, did she? So, okay. She sent me a message. She said she was going to be in and out, but yep, he had to report it stolen. I left the numbers on it because you get more and more trouble with the feds if you remove the serial numbers. We all have freedom of speech as long as you agree with me. That's right. Trump going after the press. That to me is just, even Ron Johnson pushed back against that. The Lemon situation is a weird one. Once they were all asked to leave, it should have been over. Reminds me of the First Amendment auditors. They got themselves trespassed. Okay, here's the thing about the Lemon thing. There are other, like the law that he is being prosecuted for was primarily written to keep people from being able to block the doors of abortion clinics. And there have been many times where people were prosecuted for violating that law, and many times where people in the press were covering that instance, and where they were what's the word I'm looking for? They were friendly media that knew about it, that were going there to cover it because they were allies with the people that were doing the protests. Not one of those people was ever prosecuted, and you could say the same thing about every single media person there, that once they were told to leave, they should have left. And so what you're talking about here now is selective prosecution. Like nobody else has ever been prosecuted for covering an event like that. So that's the problem. If you want to talk about they were trespassing and they shouldn't have done it, there's some ambiguity there, but he was not a protester. He was a member of the press. So it's actually not a weird one. It's very cut and dry. No member of the press has ever been prosecuted for covering an event that violated that law. That would be the first time, or it is the first time. And the statute, like this, they didn't actually violate the statute. That's another thing. They didn't prevent anybody from worshiping, and they weren't doing it to prevent anybody from worshiping. I don't see all the details. That makes it even more interesting. Most Americans can't even name the 5 freedoms of the First Amendment. Lawmakers keep eroding our freedom because the masses don't care. I will say this. Donald Trump has done a good job of getting me to remember what all the amendments are for. The 7th Amendment is the one that is easiest to remember because that's the only one he hasn't violated. That's the one where you can only where you get a jury trial if you sue somebody for $20, or if you get sued for over $20. Yeah, and people don't really a lot of people don't really understand what a lot of the amendments do or are. The 4th Amendment right now, that's what we were talking about before. That's just the idea that an administrative warrant covers the 4th Amendment is just insane. An administrative warrant is like a self-administered warrant. You're like, oh, I have a warrant. My boss just gave me one, but it's the same agency. Your boss is the guy that's going in the door with you. I don't agree with term limits. I know I'm on the minority, probably on both sides on this. But I think that term limits is an expertise limit. You're limiting somebody's ability. You're limiting people for being good at what they do sometimes. I wouldn't want a term limit on my surgeon. Oh, wait, you've been doing this for more than 8 years? No, I want somebody. Give me somebody. It's their first time. That's the only way that I want a surgeon. I don't want like this guy who's been doing surgeries for years. Everything in government is not easy. Some of it's complicated, and we need people with experience and know-how to do some of these things. And I do understand that the flip side of that is that sometimes people are good at the wrong things and they're good at corruption, and that's why they're still around. But that's why I say our job as voters is to vote them out. That's the term limit. The real term limits are voters. Most people are becoming aware because of the increasing debates thanks to the orange clown. Yep, I even know the 11th, the 12th, the 13th, the 14th. Habeas corpus. That's another thing that a lot of people have learned. Habeas corpus is the thing that grows on Ted Cruz's face. Oh, no, that's a habeas corpus. Aware of it. True Brit. The masses are asses. That is sasses. All right. So, politics just ask you to pick. Oh, whoops. Politics asks you to pick a team. Policy asks you to solve a problem. Let's solve problems. And that's really where I want to leave this conversation today. Is we need to start talking about problems. I hope that, as I was putting this together, it stimulated ideas in my head. And I started thinking, we need to have discussions instead of arguments. I think we need to have discussions about what to do with healthcare. I think we need to have discussions about what to do about immigration. And I think we need to have discussions about what to do with incarcerating criminals and criminal prosecutions and how do we handle all those. We need to have discussions about education. There are issues that we have with all of these things. But we don't have discussions. We have stupid debates. We have these stupid binary choices. And we have false dichotomies instead of actual real life conversations. And instead of being able to say, that's a good point, and then springing forward off of that, like being able to build off one another's insights. We push back against everything that's not our own thought. We can learn from each other. And I, like to refer back to the hot dog story. If we just looked at everything as we are for just making everything better, and let our better angels come out and become our discussions, then I think we can talk across party lines. I think we can, MAGAs and AOC fans and everybody else can talk together and be like actually in a constructive conversation. If we talk about the issues, the actual issues, and not the partisan politics around them. So anyway, that is that's what I have to say today. I'll, if anybody wants to weigh in on anything, now's a good chance. I agree with you on term limits, Kelly. In my mind, corporate interests would be able to fund their puppet into office even more easily. Yeah, and that's actually a really good point too, is that the idea that term limits would end corruption. Could I introduce you to Lauren Boebert? You don't need, all you need to do is just get somebody that's in a in a deep blue or deep red district, buy them their primary win, and then you've got a representative at hand. You got your own little pocket representative. I just said that in connection to Lauren Boebert without meaning the double entendre. But boy, it actually fits, doesn't it? Lauren Boebert is your pocket representative. And mandatory qualifications. That way Trump can't put some 20-year-old podcaster in charge of super sensitive information. Yeah, that would be nice if people were like actually qualified to do their jobs. But, if you're a black person, then you're automatically not qualified according to Trump. Like DEI hire. They just love to say DEI hire as though, like DEI is actually the opposite of what they mean. If you're a DEI hire, like if you really think about it, DEI hires actually are more qualified. Why do I say that? Well, because all DEI does is diversity, is it expands the pool from which you recruit from. So it's like a big fish in a little pond might not be the big fish in the big pond, but if you get the biggest fish in a big pond, that's a bigger fish than the biggest fish in a little pond. If the biggest fish in the whites only pond might not be the biggest fish in the big pond. You know what I'm saying? Maybe the biggest fish in the big pond is the big black fish. So you get the most qualified person might be a black person. All diversity does is say, include everybody in your job search. Change is inevitable, so why not embrace it? What change is inevitable? I don't know what that means. All change is not good change. But I hope we can go towards good change. I hope it is inevitable. But I feel like right now we're going backwards, not forwards. MAGA don't want to hear about no blackfish. They don't. They don't want to think that maybe the black fish is the biggest fish or the black pilot can actually fly an airplane. I think banning insider trading in corporate. Yeah, I think that we need, this is a good comment. I think banning insider trading in corporate lobbying would help us get representatives who are willing to compromise and solve problems. Yeah. I think it would definitely help. The problem with banning corporate lobbying Because I'm wondering if there would be free speech rights. This goes to the freedom from, freedom to thing, right? So, did corporate lobbyists have a constitutional right to lobby? So, how would you ban corporate lobbying? Like, does this person have a right to speak to their congressperson, right? So, how would you approach that without violating somebody's free speech? And by the way, corporations are people now. Happy St. Patrick's Day, my fellow weirdos and freaks of nature. I was gonna do fun makeup today, but I have absolutely no motivation. We wouldn't be able to see you anyway, if that makes you feel any better. It is St. Patrick's Day, isn't it? Wow. I'm not even wearing green. Insider trading already is illegal, but nobody's doing anything about it. Yes. Skippy, my buddy. Hello, friends. Trump lies and 0 Epstein arrests. That's all. That's arrest still. That is all. How you doing, Skippy? You're here for the end of the show. Good to see you. I was like, it's always good to see a regular. So, okay, I think we'll give you just a couple more seconds if anybody wants to say anything else. Well, what? Oh, there you go. Stuck around long enough that Brett can say hi to Kitty. And to, so on my commute from work home. So sorry, you got here right at the end, Skippy. By the way, Colonel Olds is Skippy. That's his actual. I don't. Or were you Colonel Olds and then you became Skippy, or are you Skippy that became Colonel Olds, and then you went back to being Colonel Olds or something? Today is a lazy day, and nobody can tell me otherwise. I've been in bed in the majority of the day, and that's good enough for me. Hey, it's your day. You do with it what you want. So that is going to be it for me. I will talk to you guys later. I enjoyed this. I hope we can have more like this, because I think we did actually manage to more or less get through some of these topics without ending up in a lot of stupid conversations. So if you want to let me know, drop a comment. By the way, if you're still here and you haven't done so already, give me a like and subscribe. But yeah, let me know if you'd like to have more of this kind of thoughtful conversation. I'll talk to you later. Have a great day. Minimal stupidity. That's your garage band, Rainbow. All right. That would be a good name for a garage band. Minimal stupidity. All right. I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one. Bye.